I run into this weird problem when I play open world games. I start playing and enjoying the game, but some way through I fizzle out and lose motivation to continue, even though I find the game fun. This problem showed up again when I played 2020's darling little problem child, Cyberpunk 2077. If you can manage to take a step back from all the genuinely important and worthwhile discourse surrounding this game, it's actually pretty fun. But roughly 20 hours in, I started to recognize that familiar feeling creeping in, and my motivation started dwindling.
Every day we're bombarded by choices. We need to make instant decisions. We're in endless combat with our own environment, with all its pace and variety, its choice and overchoice.
Choice paralysis, also known as overchoice, is the psychological phenomenon where decision-making becomes overwhelming due to an abundance of seemingly equivalent choices. The term overchoice was first coined in the 1970 book Future Shock by Heidi and Alvin Toffler. It's a problem we face constantly in our lives. I personally encounter it when looking at components for a new PC, finding a movie to watch, or deciding which brand of bread I should buy at the grocery. Overchoice can even lead to decreased motivation to choose at all, as I've personally experienced firsthand with Cyberpunk. According to research done at Dartmouth College, the transition from choice to overchoice is dependent on the number of choices available. Up to a certain point, more choices are better, but after some threshold, increasing the options reduces the chance of making a decision at all. For each problem space, there exists some optimal number of choices that maximizes the motivation to decide. Open world designers must understand this, and continually balance on the knife's edge between not enough and too much choice. This balance is one with no single answer. It's subjective to each and every game and seen through the eyes of all the people who play them. It's important to remember that this isn't a problem with the amount of content a game should have, but instead how that content is presented to the player.
If most game structures look like a redwood tree with a tall trunk that has paths branching off as you go higher, Cyberpunk 2077 is more like a large bush. You don't have to go far to have dozens of tangled branches within reach.
So what is the turning point? How much choice is too much, or too little? While there's no exact definition for what causes choice paralysis, two preconditions are known. The first precondition for overchoice is when the player has a lack of preference towards the choice set. Said another way, if the player isn't familiar with the options. This precondition is one that is encountered more often early in a playthrough. The player is bombarded by map icons and quest markers, each of which might have meaning, but without familiarity can seem like a sea of unknowns. Cyberpunk in particular is guilty of this. As IGN staffer Tom Marks pointed out in his review, Cyberpunk opens up quickly, and there's always a dozen things to discover and do around every corner. As the player progresses and experiences more, they have time to learn what each map icon means and become more familiar with the choice set. But to be perfectly honest, I'm 20-something hours in and I still don't know what half the icons mean. On the other hand, at least by not learning any new icons, I can artificially reduce my choice set, by only picking from what I'm familiar with. By only doing certain types of objectives, I can reduce overchoice for myself. That can only do so much though, and as I progressed throughout Night City, acquiring more and more nondescript side jobs, gigs, and car ads, I found myself looking down the barrel of the first precondition for overchoice. The second precondition for overchoice is when the player has no dominant option within the choice set. In other words, if all the choices are of equal importance. This is a somewhat slippery slope in the scope of video games because yes, there is a dominant option, the main quest. But that is only ever really true when looking through an objective lens, one where getting to the end credits is the only goal. Video games happen to be much more nuanced than that, and each player will appraise their options differently because each player values their time differently. For example, in Cyberpunk, as soon as I was able to roam freely within Night City, I ignored the main quest completely and did side missions and miscellaneous tasks. I had removed the obviously dominant option from my choice set for the sake of fun and adventure. This methodology obviously comes with its drawbacks because, as mentioned earlier, I faced off with choice paralysis roughly 20 hours in. By ignoring the main quest, I had set up the other precondition for overchoice. These conditions don't solely signify overchoice, but nearly all instances of overchoice have met these conditions. I'm partially to blame for setting myself up for overchoice, but Cyberpunk isn't completely innocent either. Its dense bush-like approach to content presentation and its opaque descriptions of tasks and locations push players to feel overwhelmed. It's constantly feeding the player new content, and without any explicit explanation of what icons mean or what a quest is about, it leads to the absence of a dominant choice and a lack of familiarity with the options. In the welter of conflicting moralities, in the confusion occasioned by overchoice, the most powerful, most useful superproduct of all is an organizing principle for one's life. Cyberpunk throws all it has at the player as frequently as it can, and at times that can be amazing. But if you let the missions pile up, coming back to them and facing the monolith of quests without any convenient way to look at them other than by clicking through each one individually can be prohibitively overwhelming. For there comes a time when choice, rather than freeing the individual, becomes so complex, difficult, and costly that it turns into its opposite. There comes a time when choice turns into overchoice and freedom into unfreedom. Overchoice is a problem that is intrinsically tied to modern open-world games. The open-world genre is one defined by scale and density. Its core design is built upon the freedom of choice, where to go, what to do, and how to go about doing it. To me, Cyberpunk 2077 feels like the culmination of the last decade of open-world design. This both works in its favor and can be its Achilles heel. There's been a continuing race to offer more in every new AAA open-world game. More map size, more quests, more crafting, more items. And for a while, this train of thought was effective. But it's starting to reach critical mass. In our headlong rush for variety, choice, and freedom, we have not yet begun to examine the awesome implications of diversity. The assumption simply is that more income or affluence means more choice, and that more choice in turn means freedom. It's no longer necessarily about quantity. Games now provide enough content to be immediately overwhelming, and open-world designers always need to be thinking about how those choices are presented to the player. We are in fact racing towards overchoice, the point at which the advantages of diversity and individualization are cancelled by the complexity of the player's decision-making process. If you made it here to the end of the video, thank you. I've always wanted to try my hand at making a video essay like this, and let me tell you, it's so much harder than some of my favorite content creators make it look. So please send some love to your favorite video essayist, because they're doing amazing work. Additionally, while researching, I stumbled across Future Shock, the book that I quoted from extensively in this video. I haven't read it completely yet, but it covers some interesting topics regarding futurism through the lens of the 70s. While it does miss occasionally, it makes some impressively accurate predictions about the future. Additionally, and somewhat coincidentally, the book's ideas and its titular concept, Future Shock, are woven into the DNA of the cyberpunk genre. If a 500-page book on the past prediction of the future is a bit too much of a commitment for you, there's also a 40-minute documentary on YouTube narrated by Orson Welles that came out in 1972 that's equally interesting and really drove home for me the many parallels that it has with the core ideas of cyberpunk. I made this video because I think about games way too much, and everyone around me is sick of me talking about them. If you happen to empathize with that, let's talk games together on Twitter. Otherwise, that's all I've got. See you in the next video.